September's come to an end, and the addiction carries on. So here's an update video. There are a lot of records here, but I bought them a lot used and at special events. So I've slowed down quite a bit on the more expensive purchases, but the volume has maybe increased a little bit. We'll fix that this coming month. Slow down on the buying. For starters, one I bought a few months ago. This is Arthur Fiedler's Saturday Night Feedler. This is a groovy tune. This is one of those Goodwill pickups. It was $1, still in the shrink. I bought it in Milwaukee on vacation with friends there, and I couldn't fit it in my bag home, so I had my friend ship this back to me. It was either damaged a little in shipping or damaged from just being a Goodwill record, so it's pretty warped. But it still sounds groovy as hell, and I love this. This always gets people's attention when I show them this album artwork. It's absolutely great. Next, I picked up Immunity by Calero. I'm a big Calero fan. I'm gonna get Sling at some point. I haven't decided which version, but there's not a ton of difference on Immunity. And as much as I love Sling, I do think Immunity is better. This sounds good. I don't have any big complaints. It's a modern pop record, like a bedroom lo-fi-ish pop. So there's nothing crazy about listening to this on vinyl. But I love this album. I wanted to get it. Ooh, wow, this was a big one. So this is Miles Davis Kind of Blue. This is like one of the most classic contemporary jazz records of all time. And this is the ultra high quality recording version. It's 33 RPM. They just released a 45, and this was sort of, I think this was $100 including shipping. And it was a lot of money, but I've heard a lot of good things about these. So I wanted to pick it up, and wow, it looks beautiful. Especially right now, my setup is not the best. I'm happy with my turntable, but the sort of the way I have all the output routing and everything is not great. So I listened to this once, I was impressed, but obviously it's designed to be played on higher quality systems than the ones I have. But I feel like this won't depreciate in price or value. So this is one of those records that everybody has to have some sort of copy of. So I figured I'll get it. And then over time, 20 years down the line when I have a nicer system, this will still be insanely good sounding. Together by Duster. This is the newest Duster project. It's finally out on vinyl. Sounds great. This is such a good record if you like Duster and haven't given their newer stuff a chance. Self-titled is really good. I think this is a lot better. So highly, highly recommend this one. Next, Elton John, Greatest Hits. So if you've seen my other videos, you know that like half this collection is Elton John I inherited from my dad. So he did have this record, but it was one of the worst in the collection in terms of condition. It was just unlistenable. And I found this in the $5 bin when I was visiting Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. I was visiting Philadelphia. So I went ahead and picked it up. It was only a couple bucks. I can sort of A-B the copy my dad had. It's the cardboard is in two pieces. The record is just absolutely mauled. So I'm happy to get one that I can listen to because this is one of my favorites to put on. The best hits for Elton John are always just so good, so good. It's what I grew up listening to, so. I picked up a lot of used Genesis, Nursery Crime. I got this at a pretty decent price point. This is a good record. Like the musical box was around the time where most people consider Genesis to be going into their own, sort of felt like more of a substantial band at this point. So I'm happy to have this. And I got it for, I think, like $6 or something while I was visiting Philadelphia. So happy to get this. A Trick of the Tail. So this was more Genesis. This was post Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins on the lead. This sounds really good. I love this record. It's one of my favorites from the earlier period. And this particular pressing sounds good. It's a little beat up. There's like the owner of this record like wrote their name in there. It's Arthur's copy of this. It's a little beat, but the actual record itself sounds great. So no complaints from me. This was another one of the ones I got in Philadelphia. Also for relatively cheap. I think it was about $10. The remasters for a lot of this era of Genesis have been floating around. The 180 gram remastered, nice packages. But they're really abundant to find in the wild, just the used ones. So I tend to stick to those. I haven't bought any brand new Genesis records ever. So everything I have in my collection is used either from my dad or just from picking them around. So a little while back, I did show that I picked up, and then there were three. by Genesis. This was cool, so I'm going to have some of these. This is technically, I bought this in October. I'm filming this in the 2nd. I just got back from the Austin Record Convention, and it's a little beat, but the guy told me it sounds good. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to any of them that I'm going to show from the record collection I just got back. But it's really cool. I don't own any Japanese imports of, English records or anything, like records sung and performed in English. So I wanted to give this one a try. I really do like this record. It was substantially cheaper. He also had the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway Japanese import. That was like $130. This was like $25, I think. So I picked this up. I'm excited to get to listen to this because my copy sounds pretty good, but there is a scratch on the back of it. So more Philly. Picked this up for, I want to say like $7 in Philly. Invisible Touch. This is a great pop record from Genesis. This is so many of their most iconic songs, most well-known songs come from this record. So it sounded really good too, surprisingly good for how late this was released into the sort of death of vinyl era. But happy to pick this up. It has the original shrink wrap around it. So yeah, it was cheap, and I've been looking for this record for a while. All right, leaving Genesis. This is the Brent collection by Chelsea Cutler and Jeremy Zucker. So this is sort of like acoustic leaning pop, a little bit of electronic influence. And it's a collection of the 2 EPs that the two of them did together. And when the first Brent came out, I was really into it. I was going through a Jeremy Zucker phase. I got to see him live. He was a good performer live too. I enjoyed it. But anyway, they put these out. They have Brent 1 and 2 on their own single vinyl, but they're 5 albums or 5 songs per EP. So they had a combined collection. I picked it up. Picked this one up in Philly as well, a used copy of Kendrick Lamar's Untitled Unmastered, and I'm very happy I got this. I've been holding off on this for a while because the new ones are so expensive. I typically find them for like $35-ish, and this was I think 20, 22, something like that. And it looks really good. It's in really nice condition, so I picked this up. It sounds great. This is such a good album. Everybody loves T-Pap, To Pimp a Butterfly, but honestly, I listen to this one almost as much as To Pimp a Butterfly, so I'm happy I finally have it. Matrix Metals, Flamingo Breeze. This was one I found also in Philly. I spent a day in Philly while I was visiting for work, just hopping between different record shops. And I found this for a couple bucks, and it was, I believe it was sealed. I don't remember quite. But either way, it was either sealed or it was in great condition. It was just a weird looking record, one of those that I just saw the album art, I liked it, I picked it up. It's cool, it's sort of electronic stuff. I enjoyed it. It's very like background music as far as I'm concerned, but I enjoyed it for that. I really enjoyed listening to this while I was reading, so I'm happy I picked this up. Men at Work, Business as Usual. This is such a good album, and I found this for cheap as well in Philly. I bought a lot of records in Philly, and almost all of them were used and at a decent price. All of them were used, and most were at a really decent price. So this was the quality was good, it was there. This is like the Men at Work classic record as far as I'm concerned. So if I was going to own one, it would be this. And it sounds good too. I've thrown it on twice, I think, already. I enjoy playing this music. It's music I can listen to while doing other things, and yeah. New York Saxophone Quartet. I found this locally here in Austin. It was just sort of sitting there in the cheap jazz section at Waterloo, and I thought it looked dope, so I picked it up. It's noisy. It's a little low fidelity as far as the recording goes. Not intentionally, I don't think, but it's still enjoyable background music. And the guys are just grooving, so I had to pick it up for a couple bones. Paramore's Riots. A few days ago, Paramore announced their new album, so I've pre-ordered that. I also have All We Know Is Falling's anniversary pressing on the way. It's shipping right now. But while I was picking up All We Know Is Falling, I picked up Riot as well. I'm not a huge fan of these like silver and gold presses that a lot of the big bands are doing right now. I'm guessing whatever wax plastic they've been using for these is just sort of being shared among the big labels doing these pressings, because everybody needs a colored pressing. I don't think it looks like particularly. It looks way better with this than it does with All We Know Is Falling. The color just doesn't match there, but I'm happy with this. It sounds really good, and it's kind of hit or miss with these newer pressings of music that was not made for the vinyl era. You know, sometimes you get mixed results. Like, I wasn't very impressed with Foo Fighters self-titled. This sounds good, so I'm very happy with this, and I'm really looking forward to All We Know Is Falling. Phoebe Bridgers, Strangers in the Alps. I like Phoebe. I went to go see her in Chicago with a friend recently. I want to pick up Punisher at some point, but I'm not a huge fan of the variants that are out there. For just like a black copy of the album, it's pretty expensive, and typically they don't charge a whole lot more for those specialty pressings, so I've been keeping my eye out. Eventually there'll be something that catches my eye. I'm not a huge fan of this record. There's a few songs that I like, but the anniversary edition looked cool. It's got the little strip on the outside. The color is really nice. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's sort of this almost purplish swirl. It looks very classy. It's not overdone. It's not over the top. So I picked this up for myself and my friend who I went to go see the tour live with. He's a much bigger fan than me, but I still really enjoy her music. Let's take a look at the Rush stuff. I found this at the same shop that I found the Kendrick Lamar, All the World's a Stage. This is their first live album during the 2112 tour. So it's got a lot of the bangers from the early eras on here. It was in not great condition, and it was also a little more expensive than I would have liked. I think it was like $12 or something for the condition it was in. I think there's only one. I think the side with By Tour and the Snow Dog in the end has a big scratch on it, which is unlucky. But the side, the first disc with Landslide Park, 2112 and everything, looks good, sounds good, I'm happy with it. So I had to get this eventually, and I didn't want to pay the high price that they normally charge for this one, so I'm happy to have gotten it. All right, a lot of Rush stuff from the convention. I really aimed at mostly Rush stuff while there. I sort of dug through everybody's stuff looking for primarily Rush. This was the most expensive one I found. It's in the original shrink wrap with the like hype sticker, as well as the shop's special price $7.49 from Mother's Records. They were asking $50 for it. I offered $35 and got it, so maybe I could have gone a little lower, but who knows. The disc, it looks mostly good. It looks like there's a few little like maybe warts to time or heat or something, but I'm going to give it a listen soon. I'm holding out for a 40th anniversary pressing of this album, but I don't know. Who knows? It's getting real close, guys. You better start announcing something soon. So I'm happy I got this. It's cool. Initially, I thought it might have been sealed, and I was like, there's no way I want to buy that because I like to open my records, but it's still in the shrink, but it was opened already, so. Okay, these next few Rush items are all going to be from CVC Collects, I believe is the name. Yeah. CVC Collectibles. So they had a booth up there, and I talked to the guy about Rush for a while. His stuff, I would say, it was pretty overpriced, but it's a record convention that people are traveling there. They got to make it worth their while. And he had a lot of cool stuff that I'd never see in the wild. You can find them on Discogs and stuff for not a ton of money, but I figured I would I chatted with him for a while. He was a Rush guy as well, so I picked up some of the stuff he had. He had the Big Money. This is the single. I believe it has both the Big Money studio and a live recording. And so, like I said, with all the stuff that I picked up at the Austin Record Show, I have not gotten a chance to listen to it yet. So these are 45 RPMs, Big Money and Territories on side A, and then Red Sector A live on side B. Interesting. So I'm going to have to give this a listen to. I like to pick up some of the weird, obscure Rush stuff. I'll really buy anything I can get my hands on that's official. He had a few bootlegs there that were cool, but they were a decent chunk of money, and I'm not a huge fan of buying bootlegs. I love listening to bootlegs, but I don't like buying them. If people want to put out bootleg recordings for free for everybody to enjoy, I think that's super cool. I love those. I had a huge collection of bootleg just recordings from the internet that I love to listen to for Rush, but I don't really like buying. If you're going to pay for it, pay the band for the work, in my opinion. All right, I picked up quite a few of these singles. He had a few more of them, but they were all pretty pricey. They were like around $20 a piece, which is way more than they go for online. And he gave me a discount for buying all of them, but it was still, I still had to limit myself, or I was going to go out spending way too much money. So this is the Time Stands Still, 45 RPM. Let me check what the B side of this thing is. High Water. Not necessarily the track I would put on a single, but it's still cool. This is one that he charged quite a bit of money for this one, but it's a really cool one. It's not incredibly rare, but it's a UK only pressing of Countdown and New World Man, and I love it. The space shuttle on there, it's just wow. So the artwork was crazy. I love it. Had to pick it up. And then the record store day, 40th anniversary of Closer to the Heart, the single. Madrigal is also on the B-side, so it had a do not, it was still sealed, it had like a do not open sticker on the back. I opened it obviously because I'm going to listen to these. But yeah, I would like to have all of the Record Store Day Rush stuff. I have the 45 of Cygnus X1 as well as the 10-inch picture disc for the Garden already. I wouldn't pick those up for a lot more money than this cost me, so happy to get another one of those. The last Rush on here is the direct metal mastering for Hold Your Fire. I went and found this at a record store in Austin. It was still in the garbage shrink wrap that came with it. It was all torn up and everything, but the record hadn't been opened. It was a little like, it's got some crust around the edge and everything, but these direct metal masters sound really good, and most of them are very, very expensive. I don't think this one is particularly expensive, but when I looked online, sort of the median price for this was what they were asking, so I figured I'd pick it up. I like this album. I think it's underrated, and yeah, I went and picked it up. Bridge Over Troubled Water, Simon and Garfunkel. This is one of those albums that everybody has a copy of, and so I found it at Half Price Books. It's a little beat up. It's not great, the record itself, but it was a few bucks, and it's like one of those records that you gotta say you have. I like Simon and Garfunkel. I probably would have gotten a best of if I had to buy one of their albums new, because I'm not a deep cut listener of them. But this is a good album. This would be the album I would get if I were to get just one, studio recording. Sorrow, Brawler EP. This is a 45 EP for British, UK, dubstep, grime, sort of future garage producer. He makes some of my favorite stuff. I have a Sorrow EP already in there. I showed off the 12, and I found this at my record store. I did not check the B side of this record, which I should have. I saw the A side. I was like, that looks great. So I picked it up for a couple bucks. I think it was like $6. I got home. The B side has a giant scratch on it, which is, for an electronic record like this, I don't think it's the end of the world because it's, very loud. If there's ever a genre of music where you can sort of ignore it, it would be this. Especially, the dubstep stuff is heavy, so it's a little harder to hear, and then the future garage stuff, the vinyl crackles and pops are almost a part of the aesthetic. So I'm happy to have this. It's an interesting listen. It was one that I hadn't listened to of Sorrows. It's not one of my favorites, but I'm still happy to pick it up. The Ballad of Dude and Juanita. So this is Sturgill Simpson, sort of a modern country artist. And I really like some of his stuff. He's got some projects like Cutting Grass, Volumes 1 and 2, which are everywhere, and I'm not a huge fan of. But this was on like a pretty sharp discount online. I found this one for, I want to say it was like $15. And it was one that I was tempted to purchase earlier. There was a purchase I made forever ago where I got some records and I needed to push it over a certain mark to get like $25 off. And so I was looking at like a $35 copy, I think, of this. It was somewhere in that range. The numbers are probably off, but I ended up buying a cheap single that I didn't really want instead of this record because I hadn't listened to it. I knew Sturgill Simpson, but I hadn't gotten to this one yet. And after making that decision, I went and listened to it, and I was like, oh, actually, I like this. I kind of wish I had gotten the Sturgill. So when I found it on a pretty large sale, I went and picked it up. And I've listened to it. It sounds really good. So Sturgill Simpson, if you think you hate country music, maybe give him a try. He was one of the artists who helped me sort of overcome my internal disgust of country music that was maybe a little misfounded by just what you hear on the radio when you're driving through certain parts of Texas. I showed this off in a video I did for Poetry on Plastic, but I found these at the same half-price books that I found the Simon Garfunkel at, and I was familiar with Weather Report. This is Black Market. I was familiar with Weather Report through Chester Thompson. I know he was picked to play for Genesis because of his work with Weather Report. Phil Collins saw them live and thought, yeah, this guy can get the job if he wants it. And so that story has intrigued me, and so I finally went and picked their stuff up. And this record in particular, I have another one, Mr. Go, and I'll show off in a second, but Black Market in particular really, really stuck out to me. The records were in good condition. They were like $5-6 a piece. So I was like, wow, I was very impressed. Very, very good sort of jazz music. So I had some people comment on my last video giving me some more suggestions based off of this on the Poetry on Plastic response I did. So I'm looking forward to following more of their music and finding similar artists to them. Just real quick, there's my Mr. Gone. I didn't like this record as much as Black Market, but I still did enjoy it. It also has a little bit more scratches on the surface, so it was a little more noticeable, but I still enjoyed this one. Styx, Pieces of 8. This is another one I found in Philly. I think it was like $6, so it was really cheap, and it was the Styx album I'm most familiar with. It has the songs on it that I really recognize from Styx. My dad is a Styx fan. I never got really into them, but I enjoy what I hear, and so I got this, and it sounds good. It sounds really good for a older record that cost $6. It was sort of stuffed in the back of some shelf somewhere in Philly. I found it, and I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. It's way cheaper than I would expect a record with this popularity to be, and I was pleasantly surprised. The last of the records I picked up in Philly was Band on the Run, Paul McCartney and the Wings. This is my favorite album of theirs. Growing up, I listened to more Paul McCartney and the Wings music than I did the Beatles. When they released the Beatles Rock Band, that was when I got into the Beatles, just to sort of, I am pretty young. But growing up, prior to the Beatles Rock Band, I listened to a lot of Paul McCartney because my dad was just really into Paul McCartney at the time. He listened to the Beatles growing up, but Paul McCartney's solo stuff and stuff with the Wings was what really, captivated him around the time I was young. So I listened to a lot of them, and I was like, oh, the Beatles! They're that band with Paul McCartney in it. So I was happy to find this in Philly. It was the last stop I made, I think, on my record store journey in Philly. Found it. It was only like $7-8, so it was really cheap for this record. I'm happy to own it. It sounds good too. And the last record, Vince Guaraldi. It's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. I love Vince Guaraldi. He's like the classic jazz pianist of like my childhood. I grew up. My dad is a huge Peanuts fan. And so we'd always watch the holiday specials, Great Pumpkin, Thanksgiving, Easter Beagle, Christmas, like all of them. And so when I saw this get pressed through Kraft, I think the story here is that they had lost the original tapes for a while, so all the releases of this were sort of music from the original soundtrack, or from the movie. So they had like sound effects and stuff over the songs because they just didn't have the original recording anymore. But they found them, and so this is a 45 RPM press. And it sounds good, man. I will say the end of both sides, A and B, have a lot of noise on them. It was a little off-putting, but the majority of the record sounds phenomenal. And I've been on a Vince Guaraldi kick since listening to this, and I want to pick up some of his non-Peanut stuff. And I have pre-ordered the 2-disc special release of the Christmas stuff. I know you can find them for pretty cheap variants, but the Kraft stuff sounds really good. I was happy with it, and I decided to pick up that 2 LP package. It's on the mail somewhere, in the mail somewhere. But that's it. Those are all the records I picked up in September. Way too many records. I'm gonna try and calm things down in December or in October. And all the stuff I got today at the records show and in October, I'll keep those just in this video rather than in the next one. But yeah, that's what I picked up. So thanks everybody for watching, and enjoy your spinning.